welcome you to this session. I'm Katharine Abraham. I'm one of the members of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. I guess we're all here today because of a shared concern for working women and their families. The President's remarks just now down in South Court did a really nice job of putting this all in context. You know, women at this point make up nearly half of the labor force. In an increasing number of families, women are the primary breadwinners, and a lot more families than that, they're certainly making important contributions to their families' well-being. And as the President did such a nice job of laying out, how women are doing in the economy and the job market is important, not just for them, but for their families, for the economy overall. It's really important to make sure that women have the opportunities open to them to succeed in the labor market. This session is intended to focus on women in the economy, and there's obviously a lot of things that we could talk about, and we only have something less than an hour. One thing that we've been paying a lot of attention to is how women have been doing in this recession and now recovery. As you all know, I'm sure, during the recession, men got hit a lot harder than women did. That's not surprising. It's somewhat typical of what happens in many recessions, though it was a lot more marked this time. So men lost a lot more jobs than women did heading into the recession. That was largely because of the industries where men work. They work in construction, they work in manufacturing, and those industries were especially hard hit. We've been in a recovery now for more than 2 years, and we've sort of seen the unwinding of that in some sense. Men's employment has grown quite a lot more than women's employment has. It's not because construction and manufacturing are doing so well. It's really much more across the board. Men's employment has grown more than women's employment. That's something that we're paying a lot of attention to. I will say that in recent months, the last half year or so, we've started to see growth in women's employment, and that's obviously a very positive thing. By our calculations, at this point, if the growth that we've seen continues, men and women are on a trajectory to get back to where they were at the start of the recession at about the same date, though that's obviously not the metric of success that we'd ultimately want to hold ourselves to. So there's a lot of issues related to the recession and the recovery that we could talk about. I think what I'd like to focus more on in this session, if we can, is sort of some issues that go beyond the cyclical things that we've been looking at to look at more longer term issues related to women's pay, working conditions, flexibility in the workforce, and I hope we can have a good discussion about those topics. I am really honored to have Secretary Hilda Solis here today to co-moderate this panel with me. She is, as you know, someone who has for a very long time been a fighter for American workers and American families, and I'm so glad that she could be here today.
Thank you, Katharine. Well, I'm delighted to be here and very excited about this topic overall, because it's something that we think about constantly at the Department of Labor. And I think one of the best references that I can draw your attention to is a report that you have today that gives a very good, thorough analysis of what we're doing at the department, not just at the Department of Labor, but all of our agencies across the board. And this whole issue of workplace flexibility and looking at time off, family medical leave, and circumstances for women in vulnerable sectors of the job market are very, very important. And one thing that I basically want to underscore is that while we are doing a lot to help in the recovery, and women have certainly stepped up to the plate, and many of them have really just done outstanding jobs. They're the real heroes in many ways for this recovery, because many of them have gone through so much. We saw a tremendous loss of women in education in state government, local government, we still have to come back at some point and restore those jobs and the dignity of those women. Women in other sectors of our community that have been impacted that kind of go under the radar, I think, are vulnerable populations, women of color, but also in those sectors where women are working really hard. They're taking care of our elderly, our extended families, and in-home healthcare services. And I'm talking about regulations that we're now looking at to protect possibly 2 million women that work in that industry. We're calling it a companionship regulation that would help to provide more standards so that people can get a minimum wage and overtime. And you think about it, you know, you want your loved one to be in a trusted environment with someone that you can hand over that care because you're busy working and what have you. So these are issues that the president and all of us are looking at, but also making sure that we can provide help to women that want to move up the ladder. And part of it is having access to information. So with our Office of OFCCP, Federal Contract Compliance, the EEOC and DOJ and our other sister agencies, we're looking at how we can make data available so women can use as an application to be able to look at other job sectors to see who's making what and why, and then be able to have those conversations without feeling retaliated against by her employer, but to be able to talk about what opportunities are there, where the barriers are, and hopefully finding a better way to negotiate. And I think that's something that we all have to learn too, that doesn't have to be legislated, but how we have to help empower ourselves. There's a whole slew of other things that we're looking at the Department of Labor, but one is this whole area of women that are underrepresented in fields that the president talked about, the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, and math. I am very, very fortunate. I have two younger sisters who I helped to mentor that are both engineers. And they right off the mark have been able to break some barriers, but that's a very unique situation. How many young women and women that are out there don't know that there are options and opportunities for them to begin looking into these very highly technical fields? This shouldn't be a turnoff for them. And I think if more women are available in positions of power to help mentor, I know that there are many women at this conference that are in those key positions. So it's giving younger women and women who want to make a career change understand that there's opportunities for them. There's so many areas that we could talk about, but just coming off of today, what's happening in our economy. Our economy is on the rebound. Let's not forget that when we came into office, we were hemorrhaging about 800,000 jobs for consecutive months before this president took office. Now we've kind of turned the corner and we've added about 4 million private sector jobs. Women have benefited in these industries that are coming back. Whether you know it or not, the data doesn't lie, and we won't get into all that, but there are opportunities for us to repair. Healthcare is an arena that continues to grow where we need more women involved and engaged, and also in manufacturing and talking about new technology, so math, science, engineering is still very important. And then also just overall in entrepreneurship, looking at how we can help women understand that there's tools out there alongside with SBA and other economic development opportunities to help them lift their potential to create their own businesses. But even women who are at the very low end, looking at women who are dislocated workers that are collecting unemployment insurance to be able to use UI money to start up their own business out of their home, or maybe with someone in the neighborhood who also has the same interest. These are new tools that we're going to be bringing to the table that will allow women in particular, I think, really have an advantage in understanding how they can also empower themselves. So there's some very good, exciting ideas, and we should talk about as many of them as we can. So with that, I think we'll just kind of, I'll take it back to Katharine here, and delighted to be here with you and want to hear from you.
Great. As you just indicated, our purpose in being here is really to hear from all of you. And I guess a topic that I'd like to spend some time talking about is workplace flexibility. And as you all know, workplace flexibility is particularly important to women and men who are trying to balance doing a good job with their family responsibilities. And something that we're very interested in is what the administration might be able to do to encourage more workplace flexibility. Maybe I could direct this question to you, Kathleen Christensen, as I know you've thought a lot about this.
Thank you, Katharine. I'm with the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. We have funded over $125 million of research to understand what are the issues facing American working parents. And one of the, certainly the most profound issue is economic security. People need jobs. But then the second is that the parents are facing just intense time famines. They don't have the time, and they don't feel they have the time to be both a good parent and a good employee. And they feel in many cases, particularly at the lower incomes where they have less control over their schedules, that they in fact are being torn and forced to choose between the two. So workplace flexibility used to be conceived of as a perk, but as you were saying so eloquently today, it's a business imperative. And I was at the breakfast when Mike Cook said this in 1992. It's a business issue. And our research has shown that when well designed and well implemented, flexibility can increase productivity, it can decrease absenteeism, it can increase retention, and by increasing retention, reduce the costs related to attrition and turnover. And there are a whole range of types of flexibility. There is the day-to-day flexibility that people need, being able to start their workday a little bit later so they can get their kids to school, maybe being able to take off an hour in the day to go to a teacher's conference. But then there's also the time off, the paid sick days, the paid leave, and then there's career flexibility. So that when one has a child or a sick family member, even though there is FMLA, that they can, without stigma, take the time to take care of their family members. People need all kinds of flexibilities. These are not either ors. And they are really, when well designed and implemented, in the business's best interest. And I would just finish, and I think we all have stories like this, with a woman who was in tears when we interviewed her in Denver. She worked in a nursing home, and she wanted to take her 5-year-old to school, but if she did, she'd be docked. So she sent her 5-year-old with her 7-year-old on a bus by themselves every morning to one side of town while she took a bus to another side of town. That could have been resolved with a flex schedule where she could have started 20 minutes later or a half hour later. But if she did that on her own, then she would have been penalized, docked, and could have lost her job. So this is something that I think is just crucially important to the well-being of our American families and ultimately to the well-being of our economy.
If I could ask people when they speak up to introduce themselves so we all figure out who each other are.
I'm Sarah Nelson, and I'm the International Vice President for the Association of Flight Attendants. And well, first of all, Madam Secretary, thank you so much for your support. We just recently gained the right to family medical leave for flight attendants, and and working on the rulemaking to support that. So thank you. I was struck this morning that I kept hearing the statistic about women making 77 cents on the dollar compared with men. But the reality is that women in labor unions make more than men who are not represented in labor unions. So having a voice at work, having the ability to negotiate, we are finding at the table that more and more it's about working more to make more rather than making a fair wage and having that flexibility to be able to also care for your family. So there's a lot of pressure there. But where we hold contracts, of course, representing a large number of women, 80% women in our union, we look at issues like negotiating on maternity leave and negotiating on flex schedules where you can have that time off but still have the benefits. And also to look at in your career, there are going to be times in your life when maybe you need some extra time off to care for a sick parent or to take care of your kids, but then you're going to be that highly productive employee on the other side of that. And so to keep an employee who's engaged and happy and has that flexibility, you're right. They're much more likely to be at work and be present at work and be a higher producing employee. But it's important, I think, that we continue to support labor in this country because that's where people have a voice at work and they don't have to be on their own and have to fear that if they come forward with any issues that they're concerned about or that would help them be a better employee, that they're going to be discriminated against in some way.
still say 9 years later, we're the artist formerly known as the now Legal Defense and Education Fund. And we were privileged to do some of the work with Sloan under the auspices of Georgetown on workplace flexibility issues, particularly from our perspective of advocating around violence against women issues. I will probably go downstairs as well, but I talked to Lynn Rosenthal and said, I think it's really important to go and talk to the folks who do economics and labor about where there is that intersection between violence against women and labor issues. It was very heartened to hear you, Madam Secretary, talking about unemployment insurance and flexibility, and to hear Jean Sperling talking about that as well. I think the administration took a terrific step forward with the Recovery Act in terms of urging states to do more around improving unemployment insurance. But we still sort of have a crazy quilt because 40 states do something about unemployment insurance for survivors of violence, but disproportionately survivors of domestic violence. And, you know, I think what we know, what you know from the labor perspective is that, for instance, when ICE raids a meatpacking factory in Iowa, they will find women immigrants who were victims of sexual assault. They will also find victims of domestic violence. If people feel like their workplaces are not safe for them, they need unemployment insurance as a lifeline. The fledgling 10 states are trying to get there. Florida, for instance, tried to do it this year. A woman testified about having had her abuser hold a gun to her head and pulled a trigger 3 times. She didn't feel like her workplace was safe, so she fled to a homeless shelter. And she chose to do that and was not able to get unemployment insurance because it's not available in Florida. So hopefully, as we look at the unemployment insurance numbers falling in a year when we know we're going to have to get to another UI extension and we're also doing the Violence Against Women Act, what we desperately need is the administration to raise its voice to support getting all survivors of violence, regardless of where they are, a common access to that very needed safety net.
You make a really interesting point. I think the whole issue of workplace violence and injuries, because let's face it, in some of these sectors too where women are concentrated, and I'm just thinking about out loud the in-home healthcare service areas, a lot of injuries there, far greater than you would imagine, than even construction. Women typically work in that field. It's 90% women of different ages, but in many cases they're the sole earner, bread earner, and if that woman gets injured or hurt in some way, that can create a whole lot of issues for her family. Typically she may have children. So there are issues that we have to deal with. And I think one of the things we're trying to do with our other federal agency brothers and sisters is to look at how we can use in workplace situations when someone has undergone violence or physical assault and they may not have status that's appropriate here, that we look at other tools like using the U visa. So we're using that right now, even with our wage and hour investigators, when they go out and say there's problems going on, that women aren't being paid minimum wage or overtime. We may find examples where women are being abused, harassed, and they are intimidated because they're in that status where they don't want to speak up, that we can have our investigators pursue that with the criminal, how could I say, if there's criminal activity that's criminal, then we can bring law enforcement in, work with them, and then help them apply for the UV status. And that's something that wasn't typically used in the last 10 years under the previous administration, but we're using these tools now. So we need to do more. I understand exactly what you're saying. And it's very good to hear that there are efforts that are still ongoing in states where they haven't fully recognized the value of having UI coverage for domestic violence victims. So thank you for your efforts. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Lisa Mandela from Moms Rising. And one of the boulders in the road to the economic security of our members is workplace flexibility, not only being able to have paid family leave, getting paid sick days, but also flexibility while at work to do things like pump if women are breastfeeding. And we get a lot of stories that they are discriminated against, are scared to lose their jobs, and having to choose between what's best for their baby and what they need to do for their jobs. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Well, we did present a rule through, Department of Labor, through Wage and Hour, where women could be allowed to breastfeed and not be discriminated against. And, so that's actually a part of the Health Reform Act, and that was a component that comes under our jurisdiction. So we're kind of pushing that out in terms of informing people about it. There are provisions for smaller businesses that can't, typically handle that, but to be sure, there are many good industries that are already doing it, but we need to make sure that there is flexibility, that there is privacy, and that businesses do the right thing. So more education about good examples where it does work is going to be helpful, but we still have a ways to go, because there are some folks who believe that it's detrimental for their business interests to do this, when we think, again, going back to your comment from the Sloan Foundation about productivity and actually getting more from your employee because you're making these accommodations at the workplace, just makes so much sense. So we do need to continue to work on these issues, but we have proposed that. It is something that is out there, and we need to have your folks out there understanding exactly what the rule will do. But I think it's a good start for us. Yes.
Lenny Medeiros with the National Partnership for Women and Families. I wanted to thank you for including the state paid leave fund in the FY13 budget for the third year in a row. And even though the pot has gotten smaller, we think it's very meaningful that it's still there, and believe that maybe the third time is a charm. And we're working hard with our allies in Congress to see if we could include it. It sends a message to the states that this is important, and the fact that it's smaller may be even more helpful, because we could perhaps get it done. So we're working hard on that. And I also wanted to raise the issue of, that we talk a lot about the war on women. It's been focused on health care, but there's also the component of the Supreme Court and the recent decision on Coleman versus State of Maryland, and the self-care provision in the FMLA, which deals with state workers, but we have to keep an eye out for it, because it is sort of undermines the self-care provision with implications for women that are pregnant, that fall ill in the workplace.
Yes.
I'm Kelly Ruska with the National Military Family Association, and we appreciate the military expansions to the Family and Medical Leave Act in recent years, and are making comment with the National Partnership on the proposed rules. But workplace flexibility, we would love to see the administration sort of bang the drum a little louder, encouraging businesses such as Deloitte to have flexible work arrangements. Probably 95% of the spouses that I talk to that are having workplace issues, the issues could be resolved with flexible work arrangements. And I think it's an education not only of the worker, but of the employer as well, to understand the benefits. And certainly the Sloan Foundation has done considerable work with their Workplace Flexibility 2010 effort, but to be able to use the bully pulpit of the presidency to really highlight the win-win situation, I think, would be really beneficial, not only for military spouses, but for everyone.
Hi, I'm Megan Beyer. I'm with the Bilateral Women Leaders Project with women leaders from Switzerland and the United States. And Switzerland is not one of those Scandinavian countries that you have heard about that have so many wonderful benefits. In fact, that women got the right to vote in Switzerland in 1972. So it's a lot like the United States in its free market approach to things, but they just got family and medical leave 5 years ago, but it is a paid family medical leave. And they have many worker protections, one of which covers part-time workers. And so there is a very robust part-time system from 20 to 80%. And the push women are making in Switzerland is one that tries to mitigate this idea that it is detrimental to a company to have flexibility by pushing men and women to take 80% jobs. And it's sort of a private sector initiative that reflects the sentiment in Sweden, where you see that the government itself is requiring that men take family and medical leave as well as women, to take that stigma away from it. What they're trying to do in Switzerland, where they often take a private sector approach, is to encourage certification among companies. And I'm sure you've heard of certification. It is a methodology of taking the process by which companies reflect gender equity. And a big piece of that is flexibility. And I'm wondering if I don't know if the federal government in the United States has a certification program or is familiar with gender certification, or could even maybe use that as a criteria within even our supply chain, not just our contracting efforts. So just an idea.
That would be something we could take back and look at with our partner agencies, looking at, some of these new innovative tools that we're using to compare what is working. I'm certain we can take this back. By the way, I have my chief economic advisor here, economist Adriana Kugler, who also helps me out a lot in gathering data, so please feel free to contact her after this meeting. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Heather Boucher. I'm the senior economist at the Center for American Progress. And I just wanted to echo the comment over here about the, I had 2 comments. Well, 3. Thank you so much for your support. This is really great. So 3 quick comments. 1, I wanted to echo the comments about the bully pulpit, but also encourage us to just remember that 2 things. I mean, 1, that these kinds of workplace flexibility issues are just as important for workers at the low end of the wage distribution, and the productivity gains are just as large. So a lot of times I think we morph into a little bit of a professional worker kind of thing, but in a lot of the work that Kathy has funded certainly does show that this is the gains for employers are across the income distribution. So anything we can do to really highlight that and focus on it I think is really important. The second issue is that I want to just I encourage you guys to continue to support the new rules under wage and hour for home care workers, because making sure that all workers, especially those workers, as you mentioned, that they're both low wage, but also should be covered by our basic labor standards as well. So thank you for your support on that.
Well, that's something that obviously is very timely, and we hope that everyone here will take the time to review what the rule is and look at it very carefully, and certainly would want to get, this is a time to comment. So we need to hear your voices. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. I have to excuse myself because today is Numbers Day, and I have to go do some further crunching. Yeah, not crunching, just reporting on it. But you're in good hands here, and just want to say thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much for making the time to come. Thank you.
Katharine, I want to, I guess, respond to a couple of things that were raised. The first one.
Oh, yeah. Somebody can run after. Can you catch her? Good, good catch, guys. Okay.
I really want to thank the administration and the President and First Lady for hosting the forum in 2010, because these issues that parents face are typically experienced as individual private issues. They think they're in this alone, and in fact, what we need is this bully pulpit, the convening power of the White House to say these are not just individual issues. If you add up all the millions and millions of individual issues in our country that parents face, this is a major public social issue. And I really thank the White House for taking the lead and making this a public issue.
Let me just say, we can run a little long. We got started quite late. I'm hearing the message loud and clear about the role the administration can play in using the bully pulpit to draw attention to these issues, and that's something we'll certainly take back. If there are other things in the workplace flexibility arena that you think we should be doing, I'd love to hear about that. But I also want to make sure we have some time to talk about equal pay. And we may be getting to time to shift the topic of conversation to that so that we don't run out of minutes.
Right. Well, thank you. Lisa Matz with the American Association of University Women, and I'm so glad that the White House has put this together today. I did want to talk about the topic of equal pay. Specifically, in some respects, also relates back to the bully pulpit, but more concretely to initiative that the President and the administration is already doing in terms of the "we can't wait" idea, and looking at ways that we can use regulations when we've got a Congress that's so stuck in the mud right now. And one of the things that our Fair Pay Coalition has really been thinking about and pushing for is an executive order that would deal with workplace retaliation for people who discuss their wages at work. I think a lot of America doesn't know that in some instances you actually can be fired for that. But at the same time, we know that sunshine's the best disinfectant. So if people can't talk about it, how are they supposed to know, much like Lilly Ledbetter, that they were discriminated against to begin with? So we feel like this was a component of the Paycheck Fairness Act that we came so close to passing in the last Congress. And I think we really feel like this is this isn't too big of a stretch, but something that the administration could do right now that would really make a difference both in protecting workers when they ask about their salaries, especially in this economy when workers are probably, in many respects, happy to have a job and are worried about rocking the boat, but also then talking about giving them the opportunity to share that information fruitfully so that they can find their way to equal pay.
And interestingly, let me add that when we look at this pay secrecy information, that's another area where you have increases in productivity. So if you adopt pay openness in the workplace and so forth, those places actually tend to work better. There's more trust between management and workers. Productivity goes up. There's less turnover. I mean, there are a number of areas in which that actually benefits. It's a win-win. It benefits both sides.
Wait to be called on. I just wanted to, this is Debbie Vagans from the ACLU. I just wanted to echo Lisa's comments. And, you know, the administration is doing the fabulous app. And I think what would be nice to be coupled with that is, you know, this will spur a lot of women to talk about wages and ask about wages. But in the vast majority of states, as Lisa said, you can be fired for asking about your wages. And so we wouldn't, you know, we don't want to send a tool out there that could feed into this problem. And so if you couple release of an app with the executive order that would ban retaliation, at least in federal contracting.
I was going to say our scope for what an executive order could do would be somewhat limited.
Right, and also
federal contract.
Yeah,
right, it would just be in federal contracting, and it could be. And the other thing is because the administration, the president have also so strongly spoken out in favor of paycheck fairness. This would be, as Lisa mentioned, a way to implement part of it, but also to do a test run to show to the business community that when it's the time to pass paycheck fairness, you already have a small, not so small, you know, you'll have all federal contractors, but you'll be able to say for some of the largest companies in America, we've banned this and the sky hasn't fallen. Right. So.
And the federal contractors, if I can just chime in, is billions. I saw a figure of $500 billion market.
It's a large share of employment.
It's huge.
Yeah. 1 out of 4 employers in the workforce are employed by federal contractors. And OFCCP, and we have somebody here from OFCCP, has been looking at the issue of basic.
So that would be very significant.
Yes. Great.
Victoria Fulkerson from the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. And one thing, so first of all, I wanted to say thank you, especially for making the opportunity for the LGBT community to have a seat at this forum, and particularly with the administration and Department of Labor as well. You know, we talk about being fired. You can actually be fired in over half of the states in this country for being LGBT, and it's legal. So I think this is also an important part of, as the women's community, as we move forward, to take a look at how some of the changes we can enact can affect other communities as well, specifically the LGBT community. So for lesbian, bisexual, and transgender women, it's still a very real thing.
Thanks. Yep.
The Navajo Nation and based out of Arizona. Sorry, can you hear me now? I'm with the Navajo Nation based out of Arizona, and I appreciated the comments from the artists formerly known as the Now Network about the social justice issues, particularly around violence against women and the intersection that has with women in the economy and labor issues. The Navajo Nation has approximately 385,000 members on an area the size of the state of West Virginia. And one of the things that we're very interested in is being able to ensure that we're enacting laws that are federally applicable. And one of the records of success that we have had is dealing with labor unions specifically. Some sovereign tribal nations have not allowed labor unions to come and organize on their reservations, but we have found that it has increased productivity, it has protected workers, so that's something that we're very proud of. But on the other side, these things on federal policies really affect, I think, disproportionately women who live in Indian country or Native America. For example, with the Violence Against Women Act, the tribal provisions in there that are trying to be stripped out currently all they do is provide equal protection for women against non-Native perpetrators, because right now jurisdictionally our tribal police cannot arrest non-Native perpetrators or hold them for any period of time. And as we have a size of West Virginia, obviously it takes some time for state or non-tribal police to get to the location. So when you have issues of violence against women coupled with the Health Care Act, coupled with labor issues that are not fair on some reservations, disproportionately they affect women who, for whatever reason, economically, women in our reservation are more likely to be the sole parent at home, the lone income breadwinner, and take care of their kids, as well as aging parents. So you see this like home microcosm effect. So I guess my interest in all this is how do tribal governments particularly make it better for our women constituents and our citizens?
So I'm hearing all these comments. I want to go back to if I could, to some of the several people raised this idea of an executive order as a way to make progress on equal pay, and it makes sense that an important part of women being able to negotiate for better pay is having a way to find out what others in the workplace are getting paid without fear of retribution. That makes a lot of sense. Are there other things that I worry, I guess, that even if we did that wouldn't be enough. You still have to have women being willing to go in and negotiate. Are there other things that we should be willing and able to go in and negotiate effectively? Are there other things that we should be doing to encourage, move us more towards equal pay for equal work?
Well, I mean, Debbie Vegans again, other than passage of the Paycheck Fairness Act, which is not control of the administration, the Department of Labor also has their compensation data tool, which has gone through the advanced rulemaking. And if it could go into the rulemaking, that would be great. If that could be pushed along, that would certainly help. Obviously, none of these components can solve the problem, but there are small steps we can take until we can get a legislative solution, and those are the EO and the compensation tool are definitely two big parts of it.
The other thing I would say is that in many respects, we really need almost like a public service campaign about equal pay, about the remedies that are available, about who you should call. I mean, I think if you talk to most women in America, they know that there's a problem with equal pay, but they don't necessarily know what they can do about it. I go back to the 70s, and they had a great a great PSA from the Department of Labor that had Batman and Batgirl, and she was mad about the fact that Robin made more than her, and it was very effective. It was obviously timely in the 70s, but I mean, something that really talks and speaks to people where they're at in terms of equal pay, what they can do about it. And that there is some recourse would be really useful. And I think, quite frankly, partnering with groups around the table to do that would be especially effective.
Yeah, let me say that actually we're right now planning, and this joined with the White House, of course, events around Equal Pay Day. Some of them may include a video. And so we remembered that video being so effective and being so clever at getting the message out. We're working on that right now, and we'll definitely be reaching out to women's groups through the Women's Bureau. So Nancy's here from the Women's Bureau, and there will be other people reaching out to you, because we definitely think that that's a very effective way of getting the message out, partnering with all of you here. Yes.
As a collection of women here to talk about this is really winning the war in public opinion around this. And I think that a couple of ways that we need to start thinking about this differently is truly how do we get this to create a movement, if you would, with young women, and particularly young women in communities of color. We can't negate the fact that Latinas are making 40% less, and their children are the largest number of kids living in poverty. When we can start connecting those dots for people beyond our world in this arena, I think that's how you start to win the world in the war of the public opinion war. And I'm really concerned that conversation isn't happening in some of our communities of color. Our mothers are making less, therefore our children are living in poverty, and that's a really easy tie-in to make. And I think that's part of the messaging piece that's really important.
I think you make a really good point that in this room we're all on board with this, but it's winning getting this message out to the public
And we're
more
all
broadly.
informed, and that's part of the
Right.
issue, right? But not everybody has the right information.
Exactly. One thing, Heather Boucher again from the Center for American Progress. I mean, one thing to add to the mix, you know, the research is, I mean, as an economist, I was a little bit skeptical originally of the research about how important the negotiation skill stuff is. It just seemed a little like, really, could that be it? But I've been very sort of convinced by the academic research that's come out in the past few years that has shown that that actually is a very important piece of the puzzle. I'm not sure that that's the most important thing. I'm not sure what you all can do on your own without, I mean, that's in paycheck fairness, of course, but anything that we could do to kind of elevate the importance, especially for those girls graduating from high school and college, because we know that that first job matters so much, because the pay equity starts there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it does feel like, you know, something around college campuses or high schools that they could help teach girls how to do that. I always try to talk to all of my young interns about this. Like, you should ask, and then they ask, and then I have to say, well, I'm sorry, we don't do that. But you know, I give them like points for trying. So, I mean, it does seem like there's, anyway.
Or AEW has a program like that actually called Start Smart, and we go around to college campuses and educate folks about how to first figure out essentially their worth in the workplace, what skills they have, and apply that, and then talk about the negotiation skills. And the first step is so very important because you're that much more confident of what you're asking for when you're very clear about what skills you have and what value they have in that particular region of the country. So we have found them to be very popular and useful, but you know, limited in terms of what we can do.
And how do we get this more out of the room? The events that are coming up are great, but to really dig deep and partner on social media campaigns that could even bring the message out to more people, but also bring more people into the room, even into a conversation like this. It'd be great for a lot of us if our members could somehow be engaged via social media. Just even in this conversation, I think grows the discussion.
So as part of the Equal Pay Day events, we do have events planned around social media, just to let you know. Yeah.
Reggie Oldak, National Women's Law Center. Building on the comments about negotiations that Heather and Lisa brought up, low-income women are another group that have very little negotiating room and very little ability to negotiate. Misclassification of workers affects them especially. That is, and I do want to thank the administration, thank the President in his budget efforts, and the Department of Labor for the work that has been done to try to end misclassification of workers. It's something that deprives workers, if they're misclassified as independent contractors instead of as employees, not only do they miss out on workplace protections and overtime pay, but as a tax person, I have to say that deprives the government of revenues because those employers are not paying payroll taxes.
I think another element is being able to organize.
Could you just say who you are?
Oh yes, my name is Olga Liapis-Swansea. I'm with AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And I think another element here is being able to organize at work. If you're a worker and you're a woman, you're able to be an active member of your union and a leader in your union. You're able to be part of the negotiation team. You're able to really learn these skills that we're talking about right here. And even if you leave that workplace and all of a sudden you're somewhere where you're not organized, you're able to take those same skills that you learned and really apply them across the board. So I think that's a huge element that really can't be ignored here.
Yes, please.
I've got to run to a meeting across the street, so I apologize. But if I believe the one brave person in the room. Yes, apparently, I think. Anyway, so first, thanks for having us, and perhaps an offer for us, because a lot of what I hear around this table are things we've been working at for 20 years. So if you talk about flexible work arrangements, you talk about equal pay, you talk about even what you were describing in terms of just moving around the opportunities. I'm not saying we have it perfectly, because we don't, but the example you gave when you were there when Mike Cook started this 20 years ago, one of my predecessors, you know, my secretary comes in late by definition because, you know, she has a child young and she drops him off at school. And so that doesn't really matter. What matters to us is she productive, wherever she happens to be. So my offer is this, and you can offer this perhaps to Secretary Solis or to Valerie. You know, if you want to look inside an organization that does some of the very things you're asking about here, from hiring to flexibility, who believes that it has actually been effective and made us better. That's our offer. So if you can ask the administration if they want you to look in, well, how did you do X? So you were talking about equal pay for starting. So, you know, what we do is when people start, we hire at least 8,000 people off of campuses. So, you know, we have a process. We look at parity. Did they get the same starting offer? And we don't look at it just men, women. We look at it by all measures of inclusion. And we track a person's career from day one, I'm in year 35. At every single level, is there parity? And if not, why isn't there? And there's some confrontation, you know, lots of confrontation about that, lots of debate, and it gets fixed. Part of this is courage to do the right thing. But we actually put processes in place for all these things. So we seem to be the outlier in these conversations. Of course, we're not a manufacturing company. We don't have plants. We hire mainly college-educated people, but we have about 5,000 people that would be viewed as administrative. They have all the same benefits, all the same paid leaves, all the same work flexibility. So my offer is really if the administration has any interest in learning how someone has actually done this and believes in it.
Sounds like something we could learn a lot from. Thank you.
So
Thank you
can
for that
learn.
offer.
And I apologize for having to leave, but thank you for having me. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Happy
thank
to
you
do
for
it.
coming. Well, this may be if there are one or two people who have last comments they want to make, we, I think, have time for that, but then I think we need to wrap up and head back downstairs. Yeah.
Donna Atkinson with Wider Opportunities for Women. I would begin by echoing everything I've heard, but I don't want us to leave today without thinking about the plight of older women in the economy who make up a large portion of those long-term unemployed, and of course are a significant part of the workers who are disconnecting from the workforce, but who will find themselves in abject poverty in their older years. And so as we think about issues of pay equity, issues of workplace flexibility, let us not overlook the specter of age discrimination that's happening in our workforce and what that will mean, not just for women who could be very productive workers even into their older years, but what that means to the households that they are responsible for supporting, whether they are maintaining a relationship as a couple or whether they are finding themselves living on their own. We know that more and more women are becoming institutionalized because they simply cannot afford to age with dignity in place. So as we think about all of these issues, let us not overlook what's happening with older workers.
I just wanted to do a quick pitch for the Wages Act, because with tipped workers right now in the country, the federal tipped minimum wage is $2.13, and 70% of all tipped workers are women. And earlier, a colleague from National Women's Law Center pointed out this misclassification of workers. We find a lot of tip workers who aren't actually getting tips, but they're washing dishes or setting or bussing tables. And so that happens disproportionately to women. They're miscategorized in their job in order to be paid less. And so we think to kind of also, in addition to doing policy fixes, to just raise that tipped minimum wage also to keep it in line with the regular minimum wage will really help women at work.
Sounds like something to
We
take back
have
to the
been
department.
looking into it exactly, and we know that it's been 20 years since it was actually changed, and that it's time for this to happen. So.
Well, let me thank you all for taking the time to come today. This was a helpful conversation to me, and I know to the secretary. Adriana will be feeding back the part that she missed. So thank you for coming, and we will head back downstairs.